Hello, and welcome back to Conspiracy Corner, the podcast where we explore the world of hidden truths, strange theories, and unexplained phenomena. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most talked about and controversial conspiracy theories of the modern age, chemtrails. It's a theory that has captured the imagination of millions worldwide. The idea that the contrails left behind by airplanes are not just water vapor, but are actually harmful chemicals being deliberately sprayed into the atmosphere. But what's the truth? Is there a global conspiracy to manipulate the skies? Or is this theory just another example of paranoia and misinformation? Stick with us as we explore the chemtrail phenomenon. To start, let's break down the basics of the chemtrail theory. At its core, the chemtrail conspiracy posits that the long, persistent trails that airplanes leave behind in the sky, which are known as contrails, are not just composed of water vapor and ice crystals, as scientists explain, but are instead filled with a range of harmful chemicals. These chemicals, according to proponents of the theory, are being intentionally dispersed into the atmosphere for a variety of reasons, including weather modification, population control, mind control, or even the deliberate poisoning of the population. The theory first gained traction in the late 1990s when people began noticing the long, lingering trails left by high-altitude aircraft. Unlike the traditional, short-lived contrails that disappear quickly, these so-called chemtrails would spread out across the sky, often creating a hazy, cloud-like effect. For many, this was a visible sign that something was off, and they started to ask, "What's in those trails? What are they spraying and why?" One of the most prominent figures in the chemtrail movement is a man named William Thomas, a Canadian journalist who, in 1999, published a series of reports about the mysterious trails left behind by planes. Thomas suggested that these trails were not natural, but part of a covert geoengineering program. According to his research, the government was spraying chemicals into the atmosphere to control the weather and manipulate the global climate. This, he argued, was part of a larger government agenda to fight climate change, or even to create artificial droughts and floods for population control. The term chemtrails was first coined in these discussions, combining chemical and contrail to describe these suspicious streaks across the sky. So, what do chemtrail theorists believe is actually being sprayed? The list of supposed chemicals is long and varies depending on who you ask. Some of the most common chemicals mentioned include barium, a highly toxic metal that can cause respiratory issues; aluminum, another metal that, when inhaled, is linked to neurological problems, including Alzheimer's disease; strontium, a radioactive element that, according to chemtrail theorists, is being dispersed for purposes like weather modification or mind control; polymer fibers, which, some believe, are used to create artificial clouds. The idea is that these substances are not only harmful to humans, but that their presence in the atmosphere is also contributing to environmental damage, such as soil acidification, changes in weather patterns, and even crop failure. The theory has evolved over time. Initially, many chemtrail believers claimed that the main purpose behind the spraying was weather manipulation. Some suggested that the government was using chemtrails to engineer natural disasters like hurricanes, droughts, or even earthquakes to achieve political or military objectives. Others believe the spraying is part of an experiment in mind control, with the chemicals being used to alter people's behavior or thoughts through chemical exposure. And then, there's the population control angle. Some theorists claim that the chemtrails are part of a global depopulation agenda designed to reduce the world's population by making people sick or even sterilizing them. Despite the widespread belief in chemtrails, there's a significant amount of skepticism around the theory. In fact, the scientific community has repeatedly debunked it. Meteorologists, atmospheric scientists, and even the US government have provided clear explanations for the trails people see in the sky. According to these experts, the long-lasting contrails are simply water vapor that forms when hot exhaust gases from aircraft engines meet the cold air at high altitudes. The reason some contrails persist and spread out is because of the atmospheric conditions like humidity and temperature. Essentially, the trails are simply clouds of ice crystals that form as the water vapor condenses and freezes. So, why do some people still believe in chemtrails? Well, it's a combination of mistrust in government, the complexities of atmospheric science, and the way information spreads in the digital age. In today's world, it's easy to find articles and videos that support almost any theory, no matter how outlandish. With the rise of social media, echo chambers have been created, where like-minded individuals share information that reinforces their existing beliefs. This means that even when experts explain the science behind contrails, chemtrail theorists can dismiss it as propaganda and continue to spread their narrative. Some of the most convincing arguments for chemtrails are based on visible evidence, the trails themselves. But these trails don't always form in the way people expect. Sometimes, it's simply a matter of perspective. Atmospheric conditions change constantly, and these changes can affect how contrails behave. In some cases, contrails might linger longer, while in others, they dissipate quickly. The truth is that the persistence of a contrail often depends on factors like humidity, temperature, and air pressure at the altitude where the plane is flying. When conditions are right, contrails will spread out, creating those long, wispy clouds we sometimes see. It's not sinister, it's science. But let's talk about the counterarguments for a second. One of the most important pieces of evidence against the chemtrail theory is the lack of any real-world consequences. Despite decades of claims that harmful chemicals are being sprayed into the atmosphere, no one has ever been able to show measurable levels of the toxic substances claimed by chemtrail proponents, like barium or aluminum, in any significant quantities. If these chemicals were indeed being dispersed on such a large scale, there would be widespread health issues, environmental damage, or at least some noticeable increase in chemical levels in the air, water, and soil. And yet, no such evidence exists. In fact, studies of the air and water in areas where chemtrail sightings have been reported have not revealed any unusual concentrations of the chemicals theorists claim are being sprayed. Furthermore, weather modification programs like the ones some theorists suggest, including cloud seeding, have been openly discussed and are regulated by governments. These programs aim to modify weather in specific ways, like inducing rainfall in drought-prone areas, but they don't involve spraying harmful chemicals at the scale chemtrail theorists suggest. Let's step back for a moment. While the chemtrail conspiracy has some pretty passionate followers, it's important to understand why people are drawn to these theories. At its core, the chemtrail theory plays on a deep fear of hidden agendas and government control. It taps into a very real mistrust of institutions, particularly in a time when people feel disconnected from their leaders, and when environmental and political issues are more contentious than ever. It's much easier to believe in a grand conspiracy than to accept that sometimes the world is simply unpredictable, and that governments, while often flawed, are not always working against us. That said, chemtrails remain a fascinating part of modern conspiracy lore, precisely because it speaks to larger concerns about control, secrecy, and environmental destruction. Whether you believe the theory or not, it's clear that the conversation around chemtrails will continue to be a topic of debate for the foreseeable future. That's all for today's episode of Conspiracy Corner. Thanks for joining me as we explored the chemtrail conspiracy. What do you think? Are we being poisoned by the skies, or is it just the natural behavior of contrails? If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. Until next time, keep questioning everything, and remember, the truth is always out there, somewhere.